Well, hello there, you beautiful, beautiful, amazing, wonderful people. How is everyone? I hope you're all doing well on this thirsty Thursday, the day after the midweek hump. And I'm going to get straight into the meat and potatoes because you look amazing and you deserve for me to get on with it, because today we're going to have a little bit of a show and tell, because recently we've seen some of the big channels getting involved in the Idaho 4 case and seemingly spreading misinformation, disinformation, and we're out here trying to fight the fire, balance the scales. But I came across one that was quite alarming because not only does it contain absolute absurdities, but I fear that this is representative of how a potential jury could see this case. And if that's the case, then Bryan Kohberger may as well get strapped in immediately and make his way to a better place. I'll say a better place, because even if he is going straight to hell, it's probably better than this planet that we are currently on. We have some wonderful things, but what a shit show for the vast majority of the time. But anyway, let's get straight into it. As like I say, this is going to be a bit of a show and tell. Now, we'll have to stop it and obviously give commentary over it so we don't get struck down with furious anger. You know the drill. So let's get into it. So this is on the channel TMZ. Some of you may have heard of TMZ. Over 4 million subscribers, and I would say they seem to have some decent videos and do cover some decent stuff, and they've got, like I say, they've got a big following. Don't seem to get a massive amount of views on their videos for the size of the channel. As you can see, this one on the screen there has got 24,000 views, and it was uploaded yesterday. And for a channel with over 4 million subscribers, it's not big, but point being, this is a big channel. They cover a lot of cases, and they're now starting on this one. So we have a look and see what they've got to say.
I am obsessed with the Idaho murders case, and there's something that doesn't make sense. Bryan Kohberger is charged with the murders, right? 4 people were slaughtered in this house with a knife. How is it that one person who has never, as far as we know, committed any kind of act of violence, how can they walk in a house with a knife, knowing that there are 6 people inside, and one by one, he kills 4 of them, knowing that there's still people left? I mean, you would think that people would hear screams, commotion, they'd come out.
So straight off the bat, when I first watched this video, I thought to myself that this was going to go in a certain direction. What I will say is this doesn't seemingly, the guy who's speaking, the main person here, he's not so much at this point the person that I'm criticising, because he asks here an incredibly valid question, one that we have ourselves asked ourselves all the time. You know, is it possible for someone, one person on their own, to do this crime, this was like their, you know, popping their cherry, so to speak, and it was more indicative of a crime that would be, you know, a seasoned criminal, but you'll see this kind of descends into chaos.
Take him? So how does one person who's never done this before, it's his first rodeo, walks in with a knife?
You got a guy that is allegedly there 12 times, according to cell phone pings, in the...
So there we go. With point number 1, he's apparently there 12 times, according to cell phone pings. He's apparently where? And again, we've gone over how pings work. You know, it has not been proven publicly that Bryan Kohberger was anywhere near this property 12 times. And even if he was pinging on towers in this area, it's not proof that Bryan Kohberger was anywhere near this property. Law enforcement themselves have even stated that they believe that his phone had pinged on a tower, but at that point where he pinged on a tower, he was nobody near here and was in fact still in Pullman, Washington. So this 12 visitations to this property at this stage is non-factual, but as you see, they utilize this in order to anchor various points moving forward.
proceeding. This kind of offender will mentally rehearse this dozens, if not hundreds of times in their mind. So this may be his first rodeo. It may not, we don't know yet. And he's got the element of surprise.
Well, there's a lot of evidence. The first two girls were most likely killed while they were asleep. The only person who I think had defensive wounds and might have been awake was Xana.
Was Ethan, her boyfriend, sleeping?
I think that Ethan was awake because he was in the doorway.
Right. He was awake. He is a much bigger guy than Bryan Kohberger and more athletic.
But also they had been out all night.
And again, we've spoken about this, the fact that Ethan is quite a lump. He's a big lad. He's a big lad. But there is an element of sense here in terms of you wouldn't necessarily expect somebody to be walking into the house and wielding a knife. Do you know what I mean? So part of this, I kind of do feel is right to, yes, you can question it, but the thing what I struggle with here, what nobody addresses is, I don't believe they address it, is if this attack happened in the hallway and not in the house, would there have been more of a reaction? Would there have been more noise, if you like? And would Dylan Mortensen, for instance, being on the exact same floor as this, a few yards away from the door, would she have heard more? Bearing in mind that she claims to have heard what she believed was the dog being played with.
They've been drinking, they've been having a good time. Their house is known for people to be in and out. So he probably was like, yo, what are you doing here? And next thing you know, he's dead. And I really think that he did it almost like a thrill kill.
And he has a very long history too. If you look back at some of his training in high school, he's premeditated a lot of this fantasy that I think he's built up. He was kicked out of a training program with law enforcement because of
something weird with these two girls who made an accusation.
So he definitely seems to have an issue consistently with women.
Not only that, Kohberger even months.
So pushing this again. Do you know what I mean? I just wonder where they get some of this information. Where do they get some of these things that they're pushing? But if these are things that people out in the public have heard and they believe it, then that is going to play a part on how they feel about Bryan Kohberger even before the trial begins. But it gets worse.
The stabbings. He even broke into a female student's dorm just to move objects around, just to make her fear for her life.
But she wasn't there.
Right.
Okay.
Where did that motherfucker hear that from? What are we even talking about here? So again, speaking as if this is truth. This is the truth. Bryan Kohberger broke into a female's place and moved stuff around. Now, that story was actually that a female colleague had approached Bryan Kohberger because she was concerned that someone was entering into her property, and he advised her to store CCTV and assisted her in doing so. That story has been twisted to be some sort of nefarious act where Bryan Kohberger was the person who was doing the stalking, and not only that, but this silly motherfucker is now saying that he was moving stuff around.
This out. So this is the house. The number one is a bedroom where he killed the first two people. That's on the third floor. Then he goes downstairs to number two and kills Ethan and his girlfriend in 2. In bedroom 3 and 4 on different floors, those are 2 people that survived. There's a bedroom in 6. He doesn't know if anybody's in 6. And by the way, there's a dog in 5. A dog can bite you. A dog can take you down. So he's walking in a place with 6 bedrooms.
And let's not forget as well, which they don't address here, is that this property has got multiple cars outside. So you could be walking into that house, and this is a house that is renowned for having multiple people, parties, and this was a football day as well. Davis versus Idaho, do you know what I mean? So you would have expected this house to actually be real busy. And this situation to me is indicative of someone who entered this property knowing what they were going to expect when they went in there. So how would somebody without inside knowledge know what they were going to walk into on this particular night when everything else tells you and screams to you this is perhaps actually a house that you would want to avoid because you could be walking into a shitstorm? Gets worse.
There are 6 people in 4 different bedrooms. There's a dog. There are 3 different levels. And you walk in with a knife?
But this is also a mass murder where you have multiple people killed in one location without any cooling off period. And most mass killers, that is their first event, their first and only event. I think he was just so grandiose and narcissistic that he felt he could just pull it off.
My theory, based on everything we know, is that he was potentially after Kaylee and Maddie. Kaylee's family says that he was following the 2 of them on social media, had liked some of their photos.
But also,
bear in mind, this video was uploaded yesterday. It was uploaded yesterday. And we have since heard a while ago from both the defense and the prosecution, there is no connection. There was no stalking. There was nothing. So that statement there is absolutely false. Now, the statement regarding mass killings, now don't get me wrong, there is some facts to that. But still littered and salted over with utter crap again.
when he was arrested, he requested a vegan diet. And both of those girls worked at a restaurant, like the #1 vegan restaurant in the area.
Whose boss, the owner of that restaurant, had categorically stated that Bryan Kohberger had not been in. Now, Bryan Kohberger could have gone in there. You would have thought, however, that if Bryan Kohberger had been in there, there'd at least be somebody around this area that would say that Bryan Kohberger would frequent the Mad Greek. But yet, nobody has. There is seemingly no connection, and the Mad Greek owner themselves have stated that Bryan Kohberger never went in there. Now, the flip side of that coin is, if Bryan Kohberger is indeed a strict vegan, why wouldn't he have gone in there? I have thought about that.
So it's very likely that he crossed paths with them. He maybe made an advance at them, or he crossed paths with them and said, oh, they're close. I like them both. Now I have a target.
If you're going to commit a heinous act like that, wait till she walks out of the house and she's alone in the driveway. If he was there as many times as everybody says, you kill one person.
If they're awake and she sees you approaching, she's going to scream and somebody's going to hear it. But if you wait till she's asleep and you attack while she's asleep, then you don't get a big scream.
He also...
That makes no fucking sense whatsoever. Because the guy, the host guy, is right. Do you know what I mean? If this was one target, Madison Mogan, for instance, why would somebody risk going into this specific house, where you risk going into a house with multiple people, when you could literally snatch this person off the street or run up to them in the street and attack them in the street? Let's not forget that entering into this house, he had apparently driven his own car over. So he wouldn't have been concerned about driving his own car over. He could have driven his own car over at any time. There's just as much risk involved. But I do agree that if there was one target, such as Maddie, for instance, the screaming element of it, I don't think this person would have been thinking about that, even going into this house, because he would have had to have assumed that there was a chance of going into one of these rooms and the person being awake or screaming while you're attacking them, and then you're enclosed in this house. And not only that, but you're upstairs with a potential of multiple bodies being downstairs, and you don't know who they are. What if there was 5 or 6 lads like Ethan in there who had not been drinking? How would he have known they'd been drinking unless he was following them around all night? You don't know. The point being, you don't know what you're going into when you enter into a house.
entered the house on the 2nd floor. He surpassed anyone on the 2nd floor, went straight up to the 3rd floor, which is where Kaylee and Maddie happened to be.
But then he had to go downstairs to kill the other 2.
The 2 girls might have been the intention,
Yes.
but the other 2 could have been collateral.
Well, okay, but wait a minute. If the other 2 were collateral, why is it that one of the 2 survivors actually walked down in the hallway and supposedly saw this guy, the guy with bushy eyebrows, and he didn't kill her?
I think that he...
And again, we have to ask the question here. Collateral means that he was forced into it. Collateral damage in that scenario means that he goes into a house to attack one person. You could potentially believe that if Madison was the target, then Kaylee then becomes collateral because he doesn't expect her to be in the room with her. But ultimately, for Xana and Ethan to be collateral, then they are coming out of the room. He is coming downstairs, and they are meeting face to face in the open area of the property, rather than him physically going to the room. Because if he's heard something, for instance, if Dylan Mortensen has shouted out and he is hunting whoever's done it, then you would expect him to go door to door. Why would he have not gone to Dylan Mortensen's door first? And there lies the problem in Dylan Mortensen's story. Did he indeed try to get into that door? Did he knock on that door? Was he trying something else and went to the next door along? And then did he get caught unawares again because there was Ethan, there was Xana, and that become overwhelming? And that's not just if it's Bryan. I'm just talking about whoever did this crime. But for them to be collateral damage, he didn't go seeking them. That doesn't work here. Not for me.
Anticipate having to kill those 2 additional folks. And once when he did that, that's why he panicked. That's why he left the sheath and he had to boogie out of there. And so when he saw that 5th person, he was like, I got to just get out.
My dad.
There is some truth to that. And what I mean is, that could explain why Dylan Mortensen was spared. I don't think that we... Again, I can't get away from the fact that I believe that Xana and Ethan were not collateral. I don't believe that. I believe that there was 2 targets over 2 floors. And there was collateral in both of their rooms. Maybe Ethan was collateral because the targets were Xana and they were Madison. Again, we've spoken about narcotic connections, and that just happens to be representative of this scenario with Madison Mogen and Xana Kernodle being targets, because they just happen to be the ones who have got the connections through parents into the narcotic world. Again, I struggle, but I do believe that if somebody's gone into the room for 2 targets and they've in effect then doubled their body count, so to speak, if there is another one and they weren't there to hurt that one, then technically they could have just walked out of there. That does, to a degree, make sense.
Owned a liquor store, and I worked in it. And I remember people used to come in all the time and steal stuff, candy or whatever. And I always thought that those people are the people that eventually rob banks. But they don't start robbing a bank. They start in my dad's liquor store. This guy started at the bank.
Quite a few serial killers actually start as burglars. They start as burglars, and part of the thrill is violating that private space, and they'll go in at night and just watch the victim and then leave. I mean, I've had cases like that, and they don't do anything, and they do that for a while, and then that's no longer thrilling, and then they escalate where they might take a pair of panties, some kind of trophy, and then that's the thrill. And then it might go into rape or killing.
Well, he made a lot of mistakes, which I think that points to...
Just going back before we listen to this lunatic, there is some truth to that with respect of people who will go into houses and that will escalate into something. And it does make you then question, is that why Xana had the locks changed on her door? Had things been going missing, and was that sort of as a rebuttal to that, if you like, for her to have things go missing and to feel that she's got to change the lock on a door? And again, there would be some sort of truth to that, if you like, if then you're saying that Xana could have potentially been a target again over the 2 floors, because we know that the lock was either fixed or the lock was changed. So I'm not completely dismissing that someone could have been in this house previously, or it was someone who had access to this house. We're talking about people who would make a conscious decision to come in here, like an intruder who's unknown to them, but that is also someone. What if there is someone who is known to them, who did frequent this property, who was familiar with everything and everyone in here? What if they were the person who was working the way up to do this crime? We've talked about the fraternity connections and the potential for a fight, but what if it wasn't a fight? What if the danger was a lot closer? What if someone from within this large group that we heard the night before, I don't know how much truth is in it, but there was apparently a party with in excess of 100 people at the property. You know, it could have been someone incredibly close. In the absence of a real person who did this, if we remove Bryan out of the equation, we do have to start looking at alternatives. And that alternative may just be someone who is incredibly close. And I believe that at least one stage, Jack DeCure and Steve Gonsalves at least considered this as they were looking at the people who are around them.
Potentially, again, going back to the theory that he was following these two other girls, Kaylee and Maddie, on social media. That's who he was after. Potentially, he got no love from them. He felt rejected. So maybe the reason he made so many mistakes is he went in there with like blind rage.
See, the weird thing is, if you're right about blind rage, that doesn't align with stalking. Stalking is more intentional.
It shows purposefulness, that this was targeted. There was all this confusion at first. Was this some random act? This was not some random act.
I think he.
And what have we just spoken about? What have we just spoken about? I said I did random, I did infatuation and jealousy, and coming soon. I've delayed it a little bit because other stuff has come out, but we're talking about revenge and rage, and that's what they're talking about here. But again, they're basing this off of a disinformation that it was proven almost that Bryan Kohberger had frequented this area, and also that there was a connection through social media with Bryan. So I believe that this is the issue here. The issue is not so much how this happened, but does how this happen make sense when you factor Bryan in? And in my opinion, it doesn't. And that was the point of my 3-part series, to say, look, when you look at why crimes happen, there are only specific reasons. And how do those 3 specific things work when Bryan Kohberger is the accused? Which one of them makes the most sense? And even though in my 3-part sort of series, I'll conclude that I believe that this was rage, this was anger, this was, you know, or revenge, that doesn't put Bryan Kohberger as the person who was vengeful. But that's how I've concluded that this crime happens. And I'll explain why in that video.
Budding serial killer. This was his first kill. He's been planning it for a long time. This is his, but he's a sociopath, and so I think he is a budding, had he not gotten caught, he is a budding serial killer. In addition to which, the sloppiness with the cell phone, a real pro would have left the phone at home on, which would have then shown that, yeah, I'm at home, and had driven there. This whole turning it off and on right before is so stupid, it's unbelievable.
I actually
And that's it. And the thing is, that's the point, innit? We've said this from the start. And they make it look like a pro, right? A pro would leave their phone at home. No, they fucking wouldn't. Anyone with half a brain who was going to do this crime would have left their phone at home. Anybody with half a brain would not have taken their phone and done what we think. And they're talking about, again, that Bryan turned his phone off and back on again. That's, again, this is misinformation because that hasn't been proven. What we're saying is around the time that they believe this crime happened, which again, that the time that this happened is only the time that it happened because certain little things like the white Hyundai Elantra, for instance, they want to include that. The sighting apparently from Dylan Mortensen, so they want to tie that in. But in reality, we don't know when this crime happened because if you factor in what the coroner said, Kathy Mabbott, earlier on, they placed the time much earlier, as does statements from the Ethan Chapman family, being 2 o'clock being a dark hour. But it's funny how when you get a specific piece of information that you can go off like a spider's web, and that one piece of false information, misinformation, disinformation then spirals out of control, and off of that you get all of these possibilities.
Like he wanted to get caught. If he was like a looked over incel his entire life, that could also explain why he had 2 other collateral casualties. I think he wanted to get caught because look at the attention he's got.
I got to disagree. When I've asked actual serial killers, did you want to get caught? They said, no, I just got sloppy. You can't think about everything, and that's the problem. These guys, they think they're so smart. They're going to prove how powerful they are, not just in what they do, but also in getting away with it, and they're never as good as they think they are.
They're never as good as they think they are. Whoa. Let's get rid of that. There you go. There you go. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Another big channel pushing out misinformation, disinformation. But again, I do find this interesting in a way that, for me, like I said at the beginning of the video, I feel that this is potentially how a jury could view things around this case. And if that is the case, how does that impact Bryan when this does eventually go to trial? Let me know down below what you think, and I'll catch you all in the next one.